a little past 4 in the morning, or 4 at night, wherever you might be. And this is how you beat the system. You know, so far I've seen many night creepers riding their bikes. Like, you can walk right outside and you'll see them getting near cars, riding their bikes, trying to scope out and look in windows and things like that. I take the long way. So right now I'm getting up at 4. It's the only way I can viably get in a 5 or 6 hour walk. And it's vital to keep your blood flow going. Vital. And so people that have excuses, even if you're in a wheelchair, you're ruminating, you're overthinking, you can start to move your arms and your body and get some positive blood flow going. But while all these miscreants, all these demons, by default, there's a really good past episode from yesterday that's going to be having a series of 3, I believe, on Leak Project, under the study of like the true Jesus, who Jesus really was, like the factual nature of it. Because even yesterday, ironically, before I watched that, I was thinking about the fact that people are so heavily based around their jobs, right? Their identity, that it seems really odd that you'd have somebody who had to be a full-time, so a carpenter, and you don't have any actual, as acclaimed as that person supposedly was. And that's what this gets into. It gets into a speculation that's heavily documented about John the Baptist and Jesus being Essenian, and that they had a certain belief system, and even the terminologies that they use that we think is just concurrent and inherent to Jesus and the way that he spoke on an everyday basis, and what was documented and how we see a commonality there was most of those scriptures were written like that. He makes a point, gosh, I can't remember the guy's name, but go on Leak Project, you'll see it. I definitely don't want to ruin it for you. But these are the types of things that you can ruminate and matriculate on, right? Perspicaciously. So anyway, where are we at? This is the Monterey Bay, California area. I just took a seemingly superfluous loop around, a long loop. It helps me get going by walking around the block. The other day, I'd gone around a few times, maybe more than a few times, did about 4 miles. And there's always somebody looking. So I had crossed the street just to show respect towards somebody where you can just tell when people are off. You know, you can tell when they're in this sort of agony where they won't get up and go. And that's predominantly why I do this at this time. I averaged a few last week, getting in body weight exercises. And the lighter you get, it's so simple. And it may seem like it has nothing to do with the esoteric, but it has everything to do with spiritual battles, spiritual warfare, and being ready and prepared for what's to come. And what's to come is directly related back to what I was just talking about. And that is that it's undeniable that we've been, set up, that everything from the Masonic order on down, and this is going by Rudolf Steiner's version of the Mason, the Masonic order, because he even said 100 years ago, 110 years ago, depending on which works you're looking at, but 100 years ago plus, in the hundreds, if not thousands, of writings and teachings and lectures that he did, he talked about the Masons already having been at their end some 100 years before that. So it really wasn't in their tradition of hanging up morals and dogma by Albert Pike that Masons sort of went through this degradation of sorts. But I always liken it or make it akin to the stormtroopers, where they pretty much are there. If you ever look up like Men in Black, Collins Elite, Nathaniel Gillis is a really good, we're crossing the street. You're my proof. You're my proof. Because this is when those drunk drivers like to be out, right? And so, also Robert Bigelow. If you go on New Thinking Aloud, Robert Bigelow has a series so far of four interviews with Jeffrey Manlove, or Man. I think that's his name. I could have his last name wrong. So this is like the biggest hotel in this area, in the Monterey area. There's a little bit of haze on me right now, coming from the bay. Straight ahead there is Monterey Bay. And walking in these conditions is ideal. Riding bikes in these conditions. If you can create a profession doing what I'm doing and get enough sponsorship viewership to where you're able to go to these places and see what it's like in the middle of the night, right? While you're exercising, while you're live streaming, and maybe even these situations, knock on wood or whatnot, right, would be a First Amendment audit. So the more prepared you are and the more acute you are to I would say the traditions, but the anti-tradition of what's going on in society. Sociology, the mouse utopia. I'd say this is the only way at this point where I would do like a live, is when just people who are of a like mind would be watching and curious in their own walk. Like walking, doing something, being out here in society, in public, at night when all the demons are asleep. That's the biggest building around here. So you can see over there, maybe in the distance, that is going toward Highway 1 that stretches down toward Big Sur coastline. Another 15 miles down, and that's like the long way to get down to the Los Angeles basin area. It's about 3 or 4 hours from, driving 65 or so. And then a long 8 or 9 hour stretch going to San Diego. Very different areas. If you're not familiar with California or haven't spent much time or driving the coast, it's like definitely like going through 3 to 5 different states, from way up in Northern California and all the way down south toward the border. Totally different vibe. Excuse me. Got a little. I always wake up with some tea. I would have started my live with that, but my son's asleep, and he's got to work. And right now I'm doing everything that I can to turn what I did in the past into a viable profession. But something happened. Something happened 10 years ago. 10 years ago in 9 months. So here's a little inlet to a pond or a lake, a saltwater pond or lake from the bay. And there's kind of threatening situation where you have a lot of homeless people sleeping in the bushes over there. What's new, right? Whatever town you're in, you're getting used to it. And so I was a very high tier, high level trainer. And not to get too dark or in depth with it, but I was completely set up by my ex-spouse in a very machinating and dark way, where there were false claims about child support. I ended up losing my Class A license so many times that it just became ridiculous to even try to keep it. I had to let go of my Class B license prior to that. Those were always fallbacks. In fact, I used to work for this limo company up here that I'm walking by here. Some areas are just painful to walk through. But after a while, when you have to go through uncomfortable situations, you both grow a numbness. I'm 54 in 2 weeks around the 25th. Libra Scorpio, you might say. But that's another point with all these astrological and astrotheological assumptions of remake, where, it seems radical just to postulate my belief systems, things that I intrinsically know, gnosis, right? But everything from my ideas, and they're pretty solid, and I'm seeing more validation all the time. And I had these inclinations long ago, such as the moon, how old it is, what it's up there for, and what its main purpose is. And the matrix, as they call it. the veneer, the layer over society that arbitrates a default. And so I'm not selling books. I've written books, and I have a lot of ocular issues. That's one thing. But I wrote volumes. I ended up publishing a lot of my thoughts up on Esoteric Principles of Light .com. And for a while, over the last 10 years, it's gotten about 400,000 views, which is nothing to brag about. But the interesting thing is that when I go into the analytics, the viewers are from all around the world. So I just have like 40,000 views 38 to 39,000 views last month, and then it'll just suddenly drop off. And this was in Shanghai, or this was in province. I'm not sure what it said. Singapore. So that was the base. So you get a general idea of what the movement, the energy movement, the traffic, and right up there is where some crazy shit happened to me. Right up that. Hey, good morning. Cállese. So we're moving on. And there's something less offensive, like if somebody belligerently, half drunk, just yelled at me and said, "Go faster." I'd be like, "Fuck you, bitch." But there's an alleviation of rudeness where the communication between people is epic. It's like there's no greeting, there's no cordiality, there's no assumption of civility. It's 100% assaultive, all communication, all thought. And that's why you know that it's like Tuesday morning, that's the way it's gonna be. But culturally, orale, andale, to hurry up, that's their plight of what certain sects of people are pushed to, is to hurry up. For me, I'm telling you through GIT training, gradual intensity training, that is the epicenter of all your fat stores. That's what makes you go back to those beans and lard. That's what makes you go to that cerveza. That's what makes you a heightened state of awareness and alertness that is an amygdala response. That I'm walking longer than she's probably going to work today. So the house of pain, that's the house of pain. This is the house of pain. Society is, you'd think there'd be a lot of people at it. I'm only 3 miles away from Lover's Point, then that leads down toward Asilomar. Strangely, where Oppenheimer had a very famous conversation. Supposedly that's where the predicate was laid out. I am the destroyer of worlds. And people have delineated that down again to where like, that was just taken from Hindu script. And there's something that inspires, like the God particle, there's something that inspires science to name certain things in articles. Things go under heavy prescriptive rewrite. And under that lens, that's when people are called crazy. I'm sure that Pierre Proudhon was called crazy long before mutualism was refuted. And that was like the original Bitcoin. Bitcoin, you know, the 21 million Bitcoin and all of the derivative Satoshi units, not hard fork derivative, but derivative of segmented portions. And a thermodynamic codified binary system of information that can be stored as a ledger balance. And there is as much entropy and chaos involved with that as the human specter will allow, will infuse. John McAfee, you know, in not his last interviews, but going back maybe 5 to 8 years ago, 5 years ago, talking heavily about Monero and centralization, decentralization. Some great articles up on this blog in reference to that. And just talking about transparency, only going back into Pierre Proudhon's conceptual ideas of anarchy, true anarchy, which is to say government, I mean, you could have, you know, theoretically you could have Thomas Jefferson, Adam Weishaupt, Pierre Proudhon, you know, they're from different times and eras, right, to be coming to the same conclusion. As Leibniz and, you know, in the study of optics and non-Euclidean spherical, the spherical nature of the parabola, right? Optics that shine from that. But that could have ruined my morning. Being said odele by some ugly bitch. Fingers can get pointed. Cancel culture is a prevalent thing. But I don't make those things discriminatory in any way. It could have been anyone. It could have been what they call white trash or redneck. But, you know, the peace is what you have to choose, is my point. Could have been any sex. But when you have someone who's stronger and can overcome, right, another person, then you have a defensive posture and commands. That's my whole point. You have the assumption, the false face of the authority, the authoritarian figure as a defensive posture. More and more we go back to the Sun Tzu and the, you know, the art of war. But you see how Machiavellianism has sunk its way in deep in the vitriol, in the sardonic undertone, that the more ignorant somebody is, and the less, yeah, he's trying to get away. The animals know. The animals know. So back to a physiological, kinesiology-based bio movement, right, is my hip here on the right side really bothers me. If I stretched, it would make a big difference. But I'm definitely not odeleing anywhere. I'm going to be taking my time. I'm going to be keeping the physiological response down to just an even, steady state. So again, that's what gradual intensity training is, GIT training. You're doing things like this, and you're able to do things like this because you don't have these huge, lofty goals that are so lofty, it's like a cyclopean structure. It's just collapsing on itself. So what is esotericism and your fitness have to do with going to the microcosm of what's happening on a biomolecular scale? And you'll see that the energy I'm promoting by staying steady state with this. So I could be on a bike cruising it, just cruising, depending on the bike, right? 10, 12 miles per hour, just rolling along. But this way I'm getting steps each time. It's approximately 4:30 a.m. Left it around 4 a.m. I'm gonna be living this on Rogue Beast Warrior, which is my fitness channel. But so far it's just an old fat guy that I was not too long ago. I just dropped 60, 70 pounds. And I did it using the GET training method. And if you have weight to lose, don't be shy of the carnivore. You know, it's the back door to fitness. It's showing you how to get rid of the carbohydrates out of your diet. And I don't recommend that like long term at all. In fact, your metabolism isn't going to be fixed. It's going to take some time. Once you get down to your ideal weight, using the carnivore, what I suggest is, if you can, it really depends. Some people do better just staying on it. I mean, you could easily just go more toward lean meats at certain times and cycle in gluconeogenic. So your body's going through these gear shifting processes where it's a very layman's way of describing it, but you're feeding more of skeletons. That's not really what's happening. It's quite a bit much more complex than that. And if you ever want to figure stuff out or feel stupid in the presence of, there's this guy, Anton, AK Lectures, and he lays out every single synergistic response from a biomolecular standpoint. And it's pretty cool how it all works together. But just like quantum physics, subparticles, you can name something a thing, but you see this transitory state. So what is this walk this morning and any morning or any metabolic demand that I do have to do with an esoteric pursuit? Everything. It's about energy. It's about electromagnetism. It's the truth about light and what light really is. That light is electromagnetic, and that is through this filter, this lens, you have, if you want to look this up also, it used to be very prevalent, and then I think government research got a hold of it, and I don't even know where the people who originated this, but I used to watch this experimental research going on many years ago under primer field technology, which you don't hear talked about nearly enough. And it literally is about or Thunderbolt project with the electric universe. It doesn't end there, because then you get these gas and plasma states. Excuse me. Got to spit it out when you feel that ghost stuff. Where reality and existence, light itself, move, the physics change from the field around us, the gas solution, that an assumed collective of entity or entities exist within. So here we are. That's Naval Postgraduate School. That's where those officers go, obviously to the Navy. This is a big hub for Monterey Bay, California. This is a big hub for language and language institutes. I don't need to get into a squabble with some alcoholic who's out in the middle of the night. She ain't waiting for a bus. What the hell is she doing out there? So there's this defensive posture of You know, I'm gonna point the finger at you. She'd make a cop, right? Probably got fired from being a cop. I love seeing, and I might lose you right here, and you might negate everything, nullify everything that I said that assisted you or held true, but it goes back into our rights, exercising our rights. What the only thing that could be supposed of as law is the Constitution. Thereby, because the Constitution was written, and it is the Constitution we follow, the only viable solution is to become a constitutionalist, a purist, and in that, it doesn't support the larger macro scale of the human condition. And there's even amendments and clauses put in the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, that denotes that. So what we've got going here is my First Amendment right to keep this recorder on no matter where I walk. They're my eyes. It's my protection, right? From the government. People are pushed and pressed by the government into a reactive state. Like taxes, not legal. I'm sure you already know that if you've studied up on it. And everybody who has challenged that either is dead or muted, because this is a militia organization. And it gets into the Second Amendment, where our rights to exercise our rights to stand up against the militia organization that is keeping us captive in a military state. It happened a long time ago. It happened before the formation of the US. If you want to look at some really interesting things, look up Shalaga. It more than postulates that the Chicago area was named Shalaga prior to that. And there are maps that go way, way back before Chicago was even supposed to exist. But the most interesting thing about it is the architecture. So it's under heavy scrutiny, heavy speculation, just like the World's Fair and what that was all about. Really good at covering their paper trail. And doesn't that lead us into UAP, UFO phenomenon? What's going on? Again, Leak Project, a lot of interesting guests on there. But also, you know, you have David Grush, and how you have these people who are set up through the government as disinformationalists. Their key target through a PSYOP is knowing that they've already dumbed down 80% of society. It's probably 40-40 there, where you have 40 that are very intelligent, but they're introverts, right? And then you have just completely stupid people. the masses who wouldn't know what the hell was going on. And so I'm being really fair at saying that that number's lower of the complete and total. Some people are just made to feel like idiots and they regard themselves that way. It's probably under 22-25% that are actually so low in the intelligence quota that they could be considered, you know, abecedary, simpleton, rudimentary type people. But there's a place for them. That's what this place is, the protective mechanism of what society at large is. It is supposed to be there. That is we the people. That's what those laws were instituted for. And so what the hell's going on with that? Well, I point back to Robert Bigelow, Nathaniel Gillis, and the study of what could be considered jinn. That's a way out. What could be considered greys, aliens, that's a way out. What could be looked at like Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, where you have the builders or the maintainers of a galactic system. It depends on the lens, the scope of how an individual thinks, but then their bias. Through your own invention of who you are, who you think you should be, David Hume, right? Become what you are. It's probity, the application of principles. We're given the burden of principles, right? So these stalker entities that seem to travel from person to person, place to place. So that's how big that Naval Postgraduate School is. That's the main entrance. And again, just beyond that little sand hill up there, in fact, there's like little walkways that lead up there. That's the beach. That's the Monterey Bay, which is exclusively controlled by Julie Packard and the aquarium. So they have the mineral land rights, and then they set up all these philanthropic non-profit organization type things that make it look like they're doing God's work. They're humanitarians. So we've got the smell of eucalyptus. My nose is pretty blocked up. That could even be oak and pine and a juniper. So you have San Juan Bautista, Viscano, the early settling of the Monterey Bay area. Very interesting historicals if you want to look any of that up. Steinbeck novels, Cannery Row. We'll be walking past that area on our walk here, our journey. A lot of people feel like my study and my interest in cryptocurrency contradicts my spiritual beliefs, and more so my beliefs that capitalism, I won't even get into that, and democracy, demonstration, it's talk about a hydra, right? Multi-headed. Saying one thing out of one side of your mouth and doing another. Two-faced. But cryptocurrency, as it is right now, as it has been called, is the Wild West. I follow Dabu7 quite a bit. He recently got his channel like demonetized, just speaking the truth. And then that leads toward this rally toward the woke thing. But he lays out, as others, that all Bitcoin ever was an NSA machination from the beginning against the people, and to collect more information, more data, and that leads right into the social groups of Meta or Facebook and Twitter becoming the X. That guy's blatant with his esoteric attacks on people. There's no way, and that's somebody who's crept into the cryptocurrency space big time. You got Elon Doge and Elon Mars as these meme coins. We're trying not to become the meme. Me, magnetic energy, EMM, electromagnetism meme. It's to box you in. It's the box as a quantity, a quantitative unit, a prison where matriculation is going to be this way. No free thought here, right? So we're already going on 2 miles. There's absolutely no reason to count at this point because we're going so far. And I have to remember to maybe go, I'm gonna go 5 miles, get into 4.5, 5 miles, get into Pacific Grove where things are a little slower. As the sun's starting to peek out, and it being about 5:30, 6 a.m. at that time, there'll be plenty of people out on the path here, the bike path. I do have a bike. I've got some videos on Rogue Beast Warrior. It's a single gear, fold out Volano Urbana bike. Great little bike for a commuter, for going like a few miles if you're taking a train or light rail or bus, but you don't even roll fast. Like as slow as I'm walking right now, as slow as my pace is, it's still pretty close to how fast I'd be going on that bike. It's not comfortable. Even though I got a seat cushion, you know, none of the attributes are put into it. Like I can feel every bump on my elbows. I'm a pretty quiet person, believe it or not. I'm not this gregarious and loquacious through the day. I'm usually heavy in perspicacious thought, ontological thought, trying to factor through things. And when you fast, your blood flow, like when you eat, you would be amazed at how long the digestive process takes, depending on the foods you're eating, but really about your metabolism and where the blood, like when you look at the total volume of your blood, there's like 40% of that blood is just sitting around your gut. When you cut back and you start to fast, more of that blood is available in the periphery. So you have your CNS, your central nervous system, your PNF, peripheral nervous system, and PNS. And you can't really get that firing pattern going, those rate coding signals, until you've got the blood flow going through those areas. So when it's really hot, you get this shunting that occurs where you're not getting blood flow, adequate blood flow to your arms, even your feet and your legs. Sometimes that feels good because you just are like this torso, just numbly zombie walking. But in this case, it's probably humming around 60 degrees, fresh air. Just had my hot tea, still sitting in me, giving me a nice hum, a nice buzz. It's Tetley. I don't feel these big spikes like with coffee, even though I'm waiting on my coffee to arrive from Amazon. And so I'm in a situation, again, where I'm waiting for state benefits every month. And those just rolled in yesterday, so I'll place my order at midnight. And what I discovered is that on Amazon, a great majority of really high quality protein powders, even Isopure, which I love, with a huge profile of vitamins and minerals, balanced. I don't know if you can see that. That's the wharf number 2. I don't know the quality. This is the first real live that I've done, where I'm just throwing it up there. But I used to go out there and try and fish when I was young. I tried, man. I really did. But we're all rejected. We're all made to feel ostracized, targeted. If they see one thing about you, they'll just jump on you. It's a defensive posture, but it's also part and parcel to housing these entities. You hear a lot of talk about narcissism, about malignant narcissists, about borderlines. There's all these terminologies from the DSM, right? But in my opinion, it's even more diabolical than that. You have people who mimic other people. They're chameleons. They literally mimic, like when you get into mimetic sequencing, they only rip off the first portions of your behaviorism in a very base and rudimentary way, think that they understand you now, right? And there's this thing that happens where there's a completion in the field. Not sure if someone's sleeping right there. I've tried to sleep down here. I've had weird experiences in this whole area. But this is like Stephen King novel, more like Lovecraft. This is like Miskatonic. It's even called the fishbowl over here in the Pacific Grove area. Very easy to control a psyop in this area. A lot of archaic and arcane systems could be employed here through discovery, let's just say. Craft. Really interesting. Again, I'm just reflecting back on Leak Project and some of the information that he was talking about. But he's discussing Jesus and heavy origins with Egypt and the study of certain esoteric systems of belief that place him with the Essenian. And so you have the Essene mathematics that are, it's like angular mathematics. You know, you have the study of the X. And the mathematics of vortex math, vortices, leading really into a string theory postulation. And this whole primer field thing is heavily based around that donut shape and postulations that that's what the earth and the energies through and of these bodies, the poles, are sort of like cover-ups, and there's like a huge indentation that's not talked about. So you really have this this donut shape, right? And then you have all this mathematical energy flow, torsion field energy, ley lines. They're based around spherical energy flowing systems through through the Earth, through a planetary system, and how those planetary bodies interact with one another in a magnetic way. But when electromagnetics start to drop off, strong and weak nuclear forces can more predominantly be seen as to take over. So it starts to get into these gray areas of 95% of the universe being unexplainable, what they call dark matter. Which, listening to Bob Bigelow, it was like he's postulating about that being consciousness or thought, right? So we're passing another big hotel, which is for this area, which is the Marriott off in the distance there. Having lived in this area so long in the past, I've stayed there. Definitely not bragging about that. I've stayed at Embassy Suites back there that I passed a few miles back, a couple miles, 2.5. And that's the whole thing, I walk outside, I start this live, and I'm told, orale. And wouldn't you know it, that's exactly the opposite of what I'm doing. So you can go, well, that's just a minor incident, not even an incident. But it's when somebody is drunk or when they're when they're not a self and they're not expressing selfhood through principle, they can be taken up by any energy. And in that instant, they think that they felt or thought something instead of just being quieted, right? So the Neoplatonists, these schools of thought, Thoth, right? Hermes Trismegistus, it's the whole thrice, right? The whole focus on these long-living gods of antiquity, the Nephilim, the Raphaim, the Elohim, the giants, and all the research and the study. Like I remember looking up these years ago. Before that was, all these articles just sort of disappear, even though there's a huge amount of interest. L.A. Marzulli, he studies these elongated skulls, and I don't know what you would call that, skullology. But I mean, it's the study of human remains, and it's archaeology, right? It's like a backdoor to archaeology, but a specialty. But he's also looking at, a history, a biohistory that has been heavily suppressed, let's just say. And it's a very interesting area of study. And I know I'm jumping around a lot, but I heard about Nathaniel Gillis first from Coast to Coast in an interview from a few years back, I suppose. And he came on scene 3 or 4 years ago, maybe longer ago. That's as far back as I could see Nathaniel Gillis's work. But he's really onto something, because he's looking at this as a singular consciousness. So showing you how this routes back into everything that I've been discussing, and how it's part and parcel to one another. That it's this grand unified system, and this pyramid structure of the great work that it's called, from esoteric occulted knowledge, right? It goes way back, way back, but who knows how far back it goes. Randall Carlson, looking at the drumlins and the fissures and the proof of cataclysm, and then following that sort of 13,000 year half cycle of the 26,000 year North Star swapping cycle, and to see that we're in that place, just as if we were looking at it like a big Bitcoin chart, right? Big dips, big troughs, big peaks, big changes, a lot of volatility. So where you have volatility, you have thermodynamics, you have life, right? And Nathaniel Gillis, very interesting research, very interesting study going on there. I'm gonna take this shortcut. That's the Portola Hotel. That's the Doubletree. Used to be called the Doubletree Inn. I think it still is. This is a tunnel underneath me. Very strange, secluded area, Pacific Grove. Like I say, it's like Miskatonic from Lovecraft. Even the ocean, the doggone fish people. It's like, what the hell's going on, you know? I suppose if we hold our breath any longer and don't demand the release of information, that we'll never find out. This is Portola Plaza. Looking Christmassy. Man, I haven't enjoyed a Christmas in a long time. I really think when you no longer pander to the BS and you start to really look into things, they take things like that away from you. And that again, that's going to sound nuts until you start to see of what Robert Bigelow, Bob Bigelow, and Nathaniel Gillis in Combinate are really talking about. And that's when it clicked for me, when I was watching like the third or fourth interview on New Thinking Aloud. Mishlove, that's what his name, Jeffrey Mishlove. Has a wide variety, wide range of people on his show. But that there is a business on the other side. There's a business of people. There's a ledger of systems and value. Like, how can you have someone, a multi-billionaire who is so articulate, so detailed, such as Robert Bigelow, to make statements that today, with all the hyperbole and grandiosity, it's those guys I don't trust. The garbage men, the people who are working through civic arms, that are feeling bullied, pushed around, but overly comfortable in their tasks and can get away with a little something. Those are the complacent people. Those are the people who feel like they have a little more power than they do. Those are the people who can create cancel culture on you. Public servants. So we're headed away from Monterey and into New Monterey. I'm definitely feeling taxed. I'm feeling it, but I'm loving it. So how you doing? Should we let this guy go? I took his speed away. Let's go, go, go. momentum. It's everything. I respect it, but it isn't respected. In fact, it's used as an art against me. I've built up so much momentum, but if you have empathy, if you feel deeply emotion toward other people, and even that's a short-sighted conclusion by modern day psychology. It's like, no, that's existentially how you can use craft against that person. But what they're really saying, what they're really feeling is, why are you saying that I only feel deeply and emotionally, passionately and compassionately toward other people? Maybe I feel that way all around. Maybe sensitivity is a good thing. And then it gets into, well, we can't say that sensitivity is a good thing because then they'll understand the secrets of momentum force, emotion in driving the Merkaba as a machine, and understanding how colors are a coding system to emotionality. I've seen other research on this, but it was after I discovered this through cognitive therapies, but they're not doing or thinking the same thing. It's how to access certain areas of the brain, thereby, I'm not going to say bypassing the whole chakra or Kundalini system. So you get these areas of study, again, matriculation, where there's research, there's groups, and Robert Bigelow was good at setting up these research groups, you know. I think it was like NIDS, and it turned into other government programs with Skinwalker Ranch when he owned that. If you want to go on and see anything about Skinwalker Ranch, I have links to those interviews. Sean Ryan, I mean, I could technically split it up into 3 parts or the entire thing from what Sean Ryan says and put it up on my channel and monetize it if I was able to monetize. So he's really looking to get information out, but he's playing the good Samaritan rule where it's free enterprise. So the information's out there and he wants it to become absorbed by the institution. He wants it to become part of the free information. He's serving his constitutional, we'll call it ideologies, because it's supposed to go on much deeper than that. So there's the wharf. We went around the wharf. And how long have we been on so far? Sorry, I don't mean to be 64, so a little bit longer than an hour. And I'm gonna stay on until I get to Pacific Grove. I don't know what time it is, but I would assume that it's been a little over an hour. I'm traveling about 3 miles, so a little under 3 miles an hour talking. So in about a mile, we'll be hitting that area. Mile and a half, 2 miles. And so up above me here is the Presidio. Yes, it's like San Francisco. In fact, there's old cannons up there, and it was a compound to protect the bay. In fact, that whole movie, like the Russians are coming, that was based partially on truth that there were supposedly submarines that were stationed out here. I don't know a lot about that, but talking about, the beginning of going down toward the Big Sur coastline, which is beautiful. Crazy to put a highway system there, but that's the long way down south. getting back into this concept that is really more empirically based than a mere concept. And I think Robert Bigelow knew that if he didn't work with the government, they would stop him in his tracks. Much speculation about all the things that go on and have gone on at Skinwalker Ranch. And there are other ranches as well that are going to be looked into and researched. But I think that the data, the knowledge is so deep and penetrating with regards to Skinwalker that they're trying to take this from a certain angle where Robert's, he's signed these NDAs, non-disclosure agreements, and has stated that. But the government's allowed him to talk about more than just fringe concepts. At this point, he doesn't even talk about a soul as something that's conceptual. He's talking about it with 100% fact. So we're talking about a system that if you don't follow it and conform, it is set up just like our, like a social system, social network system, where we lose continuity, we lose privilege, we lose rights. And how that's being influenced is the areas of research that he gets into, where he has practitioners that he trains, that he works with, that are doing, the tip of the iceberg is to call it remote viewing, telepathy. And this isn't a dark, murky area. We're not able to see it because of the carbon-based death that we're surrounded with. What gives our cells, houses our cells, and compartmentalizes our souls. So we have full access to our souls, but they're locked up in cells. And so that gets back into these metaphysical, ontological studies of energy systems, how to free yourself. But there is whether or not you believe in the Dark Knight satellite, or think that there's a cymatic influence here, so in our genetics, obviously, we're stopped up, right? And the whole research around epigenetics, CRISPR, all of that, junk DNA, Watson Crick, the book DNA, the study of the DNA mapping, and then how these computers sort of washed away all those errors. And recently the Y chromosome was just completed, which they thought they would never complete. So now they've got all this data, all this information, all these quantum computers and supercomputers, and they're able to piece together all these segmented pieces of information, almost like looking back at a Nag or Nag Hammadi. It's funny, I pronounced it Nag Hammadi way back in the day. Heard people pronouncing it Nag Hammadi, started pronouncing it that way. And then now these scholars that have been around those areas are calling it Nag Hammadi. So I don't think it really matters at this point. We can get lost in etymology and nomenclature and then how to properly pronounce things, but the truth is the truth. So So that's the Presidio, U.S. Army. So strange how you have such a presence here, right? A military presence. And then that's Coast Guard. And then that's the Coast Guard pier directly down there that you can't see. And this is New Monterey. What I started to study years back, I need to quiet down because there's not going to be as much traffic and I won't have to talk as loud, is how these systems are set up in a grid. So for someone to look past what I'm talking about and then call it the matrix, it's like, I'm laying out the matrix for you. I've done my own due diligence in mapping this out and then testing it and seeing conclusively, that I may talk about a little bit later, possibly in another live, is architectural firm. Interesting, right? Reminds me of some Futurama episodes. And these grids, these systems, where you see the Masonic Hall, where you see the library in every town, where you see a theater, there's this concurrent grid system where things in a town are placed a certain way that if you were to topographically look at it, you know, from above, looking down, you'd swear that you were looking at a piece of a computer that was part of a motherboard system, right? A grid system, if you will. And that's even how these blocks are designated, not just through power systems and the Metcalf phone systems, but the way that they're shaped. They're shaped in these blocks, right? So this is where I really need to kind of quiet down a little bit, because you got people that are going to work and getting their last little bit of sleep in here. It's going to be quiet. This is like what we earned. We just walked 3.5, 4 miles to earn this quiet little spot. My glasses are all fogged up. And I am wet out here, it's damp. Her husband or significant other walks in and says, "What the hell are you watching?" It's like, "What, that guy's you're just watching him walk around." It's like, I couldn't shut him up a little while ago, right? So these beings that are like considered muses or jinn, they're invited in. This is why people do rituals. This is the fascination with the Ouija board. This gets into animism and totems and Hinduism and the demons, the diamonds, which you'll see through scholarly article that the root to these demons was just, they could have been referring to demons or angels, malevolent or benevolent energies. And what Nathaniel Gillis looks at is that these are disincarnate. They were all people. Whether they were giants, whether they had 6 fingers. Did you ever think of that? Like in Hinduism, I believe that that's the only area of postulation where you get into this. And it's interesting how so many anomalies occur with birth, right? That emulate or mimic this. But, 6 arms, several legs, 2 heads, getting away from, talk about asymmetry, right? Getting away from Vitruvian man as the measure of universal man, right? The octopus, so intelligent, the crow, they've still got appendages, but how they work with their own nervous systems. Even the orangutan, primates, and how they move through multiplanar movements. They're not inhibited into a sagittal movement system. And that's what these very uncomfortable shoes are, and why I walk so slow, is that I'm going to be able to, there's someone going to the gym. I was pretty much hired for a management position down there years back. And that's when this weird stuff was really becoming quite prevalent. Once you start to dabble and use your mind, So I hate to mention this person because they're so capitalistic. In fact, I'm not going to, because I'm not feeding the capitalists. I'm not feeding people who especially take advantage and take for granted the sacred knowledge that I'm talking to you about. You have to get into this concept and try it on, which is, are we being protected? I've heard Nathaniel Gillis being asked that in an interview. I've heard Robert Bigelow kind of around the fringe being asked that. And the general connotation is, I don't know. Like, as evil as this seems, it gets back into Gresh, but I hate to even use him because, he's the psyop, tip of the iceberg, right, at present time. You'll never remember who that is. They wash their people away. They wash away times, places, events. But I don't think they're going to be able to wash this one away. There's this scary notion that we've reached the pinnacle of information where we have to know, but once we do know, it's going to cause such an uproar, such a ruckus among people that they won't be able to deal with or fathom what's being said to them. It'll instantly go into a gaslighting, Stockholm syndrome, reactive PTSD conclusion where people their amygdala is firing off. A lot of people are just going to become sick. That gets into what this is, why the operation is happening, and what we really are. many of us might not even believe it because we've been lied to so much. We're being preoccupied with work, money, and it could be why there's such a heavy control mechanism now. Not that it always wasn't, but it's being placed in such a way where it's total totalitarian control. It's a hegemony times a trillion. That's why all these corporations are being guided and told to gobble up as much control as possible, and the government's already in control. From Twitter to Google to Facebook, all that. They wouldn't let them go on. A buildup of confidence in the, $1 trillion some odd cryptocurrency market. Those who have interest are involved. In fact, I was just watching Ben Armstrong's channel, and AJ was talking about how 1 in 5 Americans have now adopted some form of cryptocurrency. So you really see how it's that 1 in 5 in a decade when all the baby boomers are starting to die off. I hate to put it like that, but that's planned obsolescence, right? Even though we try to stay relevant, we are made to be irrelevant by proxy. Doesn't that infuriate me and everyone else? And not until you're there are you going to feel that. But that mass adoption, it doesn't have to be 5 out of 5. Once you get 2 or 3 out of 5, 2.5 out of 5, there's people walking around that don't even have $1 in their pocket. I don't. So there's people that are going to work every day who don't have $1 in their pocket. Or gas, And they're right on that fringe where they're not even really getting help from government programs. And that's becoming the norm. And it's pushing toward what they want to assume as us to assume as socialism. But that's not really what's happening, is it? It's not socialism. In fact, those books on socialism, there's stacks of them. They did a real job on people in Africa to where that's another person to look up, Charles Hoskinson, through Ada Cardano. He's been trying to set up a monetary system there for a very long time for the unbanked, because these people absolutely rejected the version of the CBDC. They saw it. They saw that they had no control and that the government would just take it all because they've lived it. So when you don't have this false promise of these parameters of government, law, anytime people are validating the law or saying that the law is immutable, they lose me instantly. Because once the physics change in an environment, there's no more law. And so the only thing that stands concurrent is principles. Looks like we might have to cross. Let's see what's going on here. Yeah, it might be. So you have the hostel over here. I believe that's the only hostel in Monterey. That's an expensive hostel. Like if you look it up, you'll be lucky to get into this youth hostel for, I think, less than like $95. It's another way that they make it impossible for people to come into certain areas. But then you have all this county dumping in specific areas that need those 211, 411 government supply units of structure to feed them government checks. So you have this big racket going on with the homeless system that'll never be solved. In fact, it's going to be growing at an exorbitant rate to where many of you that listen to this later are going to find yourself during the time that this was live streamed. And by the time you see it in the near future, it's October 9th, 2023, you'll find yourself in a situation where you're becoming homeless. And I think that number again is going to be going from, it's going to reach 1 out of 5 or 20% of people will be homeless. And then it's going to go into 40 to 60%. It doesn't have to reach 100% to become, I mean, that's what we've learned through this pandemic, right? Like, it doesn't have to reach 100%. 100% isn't the value. Not even if you believe in the King James Bible and you take any validity to the story of Noah. Can't believe we're here already. Thanks for keeping me company. Yeah, we're good. We're good to go. So we got to keep moving. The deluge. If you take that to heart, the Bible doesn't even make claim that everything was destroyed then. That wasn't even 100%. So this is getting into Pacific Grove. This used to be my favorite little walk. This stretch, this 1 mile stretch. So, used to live down here near 17th Street. And it was exactly a mile run to about where I'm standing right here. Maybe that corner up there. No, this is probably it. So we're a mile away from reaching Pacific Grove. We're going from New Monterey into Pacific Grove right now. Up there is Pine Avenue. That's the beach down there. It's probably what? Going on. So we left at 4 a.m. It's probably 5:45, I would say. 5:45, 6 a.m. I have no way of telling. Depends on how slow I'm walking, right? So up here I'm going to be sitting down, taking a little breather, and in the weeks to come, as I'm getting leaner and leaner and sticking on this, because I have plenty of provisions this time around. For those of you who don't know what I'm talking about, it's on my other channel, Rogue Beast Warrior, where I'm losing, I just lost over 60 pounds. That's a little embellishment because I was close to 240 and I am now totally depleted. I'm around 170. But last night I was 178, but that's with like waste in my system, totally carb loaded. And I tend to lose pretty rapidly, especially walking as much as I am. So, you know, you could say that I lost what would that be, like 70 pounds? But I didn't lose that much because I was weighing myself, I was 238 and a half about 7-8 months ago. And just from starting to train, doing weight training, I had dropped about 5 pounds. So I got down to about 232. But it was all fat around my chest, my belly. Not just, but and I thought about going bigger, but I remember my philosophy in training that's based on my bone structure, my bone density, wrist circumference, and how I always trained people in the past. Me being a medium frame person, I'm getting back to my ideal weight, which ironically, people have scoffed at those charts, especially Americans. It's like, how can you say that 6 feet tall, good morning, that 6 feet tall, medium frame person should weigh 160 pounds? What are you talking about? And when you get lean, you realize that that's exactly what you weigh. And so a lot of people think they have a lot more muscle mass on them than they do. And more so when you lose that bulk, when you lose all that fat, you're losing some muscle mass as well. And that's why I think that the protein intake around the clock becomes essential. Now, when I'm walking, I don't eat. In fact, doing it on an empty stomach will allow your growth hormone to exercise acts as insulin. So you don't need insulin. So I think the big thing that's happening here, the big pandemic, is that people, it's called get off your ass pandemic, or you're dying because you're sitting on your ass. Now I understand, because I was a top level trainer for many years. I worked for Equinox Fitness, I worked for 24 Hour Fitness, I worked for Club One, I've run my own business, I've worked for private businesses, and I lost my ability to do that because of machinations and lies, allegations about child support. I literally had someone who lied about me, 100% lied. Like all the money and time that I put into my kids, I couldn't prove it. I was always just a trusting, good father who gave everything I could. And I've seen that these entities working in people is how I have such a personal relationship with it. And it's not just, an ex-spouse that's completely diabolical. In fact, there's no intelligence there. So when you see this diabolical nature come about, it's when you see somebody who is being played like an avatar. So I know the whole I had a complete and total narcissistic father who ignored me, was competitive, was jealous. And I'm not getting out my little violin here. I'm just telling you, I have firsthand account. And then how the nuances that people pick up on through body posturing, NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, are undeniable. But when you're healthy and you're not carrying the toxic weight on your back, you still are under attack. You're still heavily under scrutiny by the same force. Even if you travel halfway across the country or the world, you're going to come face to face with what you would swear is the same persona or personality. And so these areas of study that Bob Bigelow and Nathaniel Gillis and others are seriously looking into for the advancement of knowing, of disclosure. And that's where the disclosure is. It's like what are these things? What are these tricksters, these malicious entities that seem to give favor? You know, what is this that's being talked about in the Bible about Solomon controlling demons and being like, what the hell's going on here? Like, it's such a contradiction, right? So you have this clear understanding of the right-hand path and the left-hand path. You know, and I know I talk about it. I have enough videos down there discussing this. And a lot of it is speculation. But the whole area of demystifying and making transparent information that was just culturally accepted, cult of personality, however you want to view it, a transparency is being demanded. In other words, there has to be empirical evidence to support any claim. There's not going to be any more sifting off of money and information with what I'm about to pass right here. And this was a religious compound that even had gates that would be shut off to the general public before cars were around. We're talking, this used to be a wealthy person's destination. That's what Del Monte is all about. That name, that moniker Del Monte, was a rail system that brought very wealthy people down from the Bay Area, San Francisco, down to this area, and that's what the Del Monte Lodge is. But there's the Catholic Church, St. Angeles. You see the philanthropic efforts, but then you see all the money that is being sifted and siphoned out through these religious organizations. Good morning.
Good morning.
Oh, excuse me. And so, it's good to see people walking. It's good to see people up early walking. I gotta say, I like to see walking because walking is the truth. Walking is the universal mechanism. We look past that too. But this little walk is where I began to discover. I saw this homeless guy, Bob, who's passed away since. I tried to get the guy to go to the hospital year after year. He picked his nose off. Every time I would buy a vehicle, not every time, but as much as I could, I'd try to pick him up, let him hang out in it, take him for a ride, get burgers together, whatever. Jam out on some music. Neither of us could play for crap, but we both like to jam. But I started to look from an investigative level at the claims that he made. And he'd been a constant in this town for 30 years. He was living off disability. He only had like $900 per month. It wasn't enough for him to get into any sort of housing situation. And let's be clear about what happens once you get into these situations. It's not pretty. Even these, from the outside, to think that these shelters are any good. Like how much, just ask yourself, how much is freedom important to you? And then you start to look at the majority of homeless people. Yeah, you could say they're drug addicts. You could say anything you want, and you're probably right, okay? But aside from that, what they're looking for is the ability to be able to exercise their freedoms, and after a while when they've seen enough and experienced enough and they go back to a traditional job or get housing, there's no way they can close their eyes back up to it. So back to Bob, as I saw him making these claims year after year, every time I would talk to him about how he's walking, no, we're not going to walk that way. Because I would go on this walk. Walking's always been a fundamental part of my routine. When I didn't do it, you saw what happened. When I didn't do it, you saw what happened. What's happening is the water is now on my screen, and it's making it's making it look like I'm pushing, ending the stream. But he would talk about how it would invariably control the weather. The way he stated it is, oh no, I don't want to go that way. I'll make it all foggy and dreary. No, I got to go this way if I'm going to, and I started to notice he's traveling around this grid, starting right near the Masonic Hall, right across from the post office, walking past the library, going down to that corner that I pointed out to you about a mile back, looping all the way around, going past this series of churches and so forth, past the library. And after walking with him, you could say this is anecdotal, you could say that I'm infusing information here. Anything could be said. I mean, that's the term empirical or having evidential, information, inter-rater reliability or double-blind study reliability. You could always stop certain claims. It's whether or not you have the experience and want to believe in such a posit or postulation. But I swear that as we were doing this, and he would say, oh no, I gotta get orange juice. It's the only way to make it sunny. It's the only way to, and he'd say it so often. And I start to think, I'm like, he's the only one around here that's thinking and doing this. So this gets back into this ontology, right? He's the only one here doing this. Like no one, you could say, oh yeah, he's the only crazy guy that's walking, except for me, who's walking, thinking, and doing this. Well, obviously he was considered more of like a schizophrenic type of a personality, but why? Like, what do we reference as schizophrenic? It's like, well, they hear voices, they're talking to voices, and it's like, yeah. And then you have this billionaire saying the same thing, but he's giving you proof. And he's not even able to hand all that proof over, because much of this proof goes back to the government. You have Nathaniel Gillis, who's actually looking at the biohistorical markers of this phenomenon, the Dubuque, like you have the Dubuque box, things that become mainstream articles of endeavor, but what they really mean, what they really point to, is a spiritual energy source of force, but the liminal, like that area of study with the liminal. People are falling back on their druthers, believing in aliens, believing in greys, believing in Sasquatch, because the postulation or the posit that these things could take on any form morphologically, instantaneously, and are kind of this is the wrong word, but like this prima materia, pre-substance that is not carbon solidified, but you would swear that it is a solid object, right? And what's a solid object, right? It's like, again, you have this electromagnetic rebounding, this interference this rejection, I'm not really hitting that wall. I'm not really interacting with something that's solid. It's the atoms, it's the molecules, it's the refraction, it's the rejection, it is the electromagnetic polarity that we're dealing with. And that's where it gets into these cymatic influences. And so we start to see how technology is working with this so-called spirituality. And this is about where I started to realize this, is that and so I'm kind of going on this walk right now. I'm kind of on this track where I can't stop at the places that I've graduated from and rest for a moment. I need to adopt a new mapping system, right? I need to go further. I need to express myself more. And going through this walk, through this trial with my own mapping system that goes back to my childhood, that goes back to my hardships, that goes back to the town that I'm from, become essential in the process of clearing out the false man, the straw man, the quasi-man, in order to embrace the overman and the underground man that is the same entity, the same person. You have this dualistic quality, the man rejected, right? So we're going to be walking down this road to get down toward the beach. And boy, it's getting sopped. It's getting sopped in. Like I'm glad that I wore a little bit extra because I'm getting pretty wet. This is great. What we think of as simple businesses, simple jobs, they're extremely hard to get. There's so many people who starve and are sacrificed so that others can take for granted the meal that's placed before them, the ease of the job that's before them. And they're nothing but conformists. They're conforming to an ideology, an umbrella, if you will. And every time the shit hits the fan, they hide. No, they got their retirement coming up. They got their pension plan. They have their IRAs. They got to focus in on their family, their money. Meanwhile, their family fell apart long ago. They never see their kids because they're working all the time. Everybody ends up in this place where they feel utterly betrayed. They don't want to look at their kids as they get older because their kids don't really give a flying shit about them. They only care about the money. Everybody says it. And they're just, if they're still alive, they survive, they're just stressed out capitalists. So where's it all go to? And it comes back to the central theme of principles. But principles are only a reaction. The main principle at work is purity. And no matter what comes into your body, understand this. And that's why it's so important. Like I'm walking right now as I'm doing this. I'm exercising out the demons. I'm claiming myself, my body, as that this soul that inhabits this body, it's mine, it's a claim. Nothing can make you move. Isn't that interesting? How in these movies like The Exorcist, you see these movie demons jump into people's bodies and animate the body. That's not what demons do. They keep you ruminating, overthinking, literally staying in a room, and hiding from people. So why am I up at 3:30 this morning? I just ran my mouth and walked 5, maybe going on 6, 5.5 maybe. I'm probably embellishing it a little bit. Used to live in this house long ago. And I lived here with my ex-wife while her old boyfriend lived up there, and she cheated on me with him and plays me for a fool and acts like it never happened when it went on for years. And I didn't really care until she started. So I didn't care. That is the common sign of somebody who's gone through narcissistic abuse. She is a malignant narcissist. I have to leave that behind me, but I have kids who are now son husbands. And I have one that's disabled because she, behind my back, put him on meds, right? When he was very young, without telling me. I've gone to a lawyer. There's very little that you can do if you're not rich, and that if you're not batting your eyes, acting cute, or have something to offer up as a form of barter. So I'm going to kind of shut up because this is a really pretty area down here. This is Lover's Point, and then over to the left is Asilomar. Some of the most beautiful stretch of beach coastline. And I told you what I'm doing. I already did my 5-6 mile walk, and it feels great. Now we're gonna go another 10. Just to warm up. We're going 5-6 hours today. It's still a good, I would say, hour before the sun comes up. So we're gonna space this out into minimum little workouts, and then we're gonna train later. So the idea is to stay steady state. Instead of sitting on your ass, you try to stay moving for 8 hours a day. Usually there's more people down here, but it's a really wet day. I've been in this glass bottom boat as a child when it was all dilapidated. The tools, the people up the street that lived up the street from me ran this business. But like most things, out of all the experiences down here, from being left down here naked as a little baby, picking the sand out of my ass, and that is where the original bathhouses used to be. As I remember out on that pier, these teenagers, idle in their way. We're talking back in the 70s, like I was born in 69. I'll be 54, I'm an old guy. Try sleeping down there, it is freaking cold. There's no way you can. That's why you don't see a bunch of homeless people lined up out there. That sand will freeze your ass. Also, it's illegal. You can't just crash out, even though it would be a beautiful thing, but this used to be called Jesus Point. We'll get into talks about that in a little bit, because a lot of what I've speculated about Jesus, the disciples, oh, looks like I'm running low on battery, have been validated, and the information's coming out. And a lot of information like the Naj Hammadi that predates all the biblical texts that were amendments. So anyway, thank you for going on this live stream with me. We'll be doing a lot more esoteric studies. And have a great day, okay? I think I'm doing this right. All right.